I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, let's take a look at our top stories. More than 150 people are now known to have died in Spain's flash floods. A major search continues for large numbers still missing. As the Prime Minister and the Chancellor take to the road to sell their budget, there are jitters in the markets over the level of UK borrowing. And more than 400 alleged victims and witnesses have come forward in the investigation into the claims of sexual abuse by the former Harrods owner, Mohammed Al Fayed. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome both. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, in the wake of the budget, The Telegraph leads with the adverse reaction on the financial markets. The headline, markets turn on Reeves over tax burden. The Financial Times says investor worries have driven up the cost of government borrowing and pushed down the value of the pound against the dollar. The Express, meanwhile, carries an admission by what it called a remorseless chancellor that the budget will hit workers in the pay packet. The Eye, meanwhile, carries a warning from economists that interest and mortgage rates will now fall more slowly than had been expected. The Guardian says the Chancellor has also been warned that she'll need to find another £9 billion to maintain public services. While the Mail says the budget will cost charities an extra £1.4 billion, jeopardising jobs and the help that they provide. The Sun looks at the plight of farmers now facing increased inheritance tax after changes in the budget. The paper calls it a kick in the bullocks. The Times focuses on the soaring welfare bill, half of which it's predicted will be taken up in sickness benefits by the end of this parliamentary term. The Mirror leads on the flash floods in Spain with the headline, Trapped in a Nightmare. The Metro reports that 400 alleged victims and witnesses of the late Harrods owner's reported sexual abuse of women have begun legal action. The store's current owners say they're appalled at the claims and are investigating. And finally, the Star leads on what it says is a plan to ban children singing the song, What Shall We Do with the Drunken Sailor? And we'll tell you what they've changed that line to a little later. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Steve Richards and Salma Shah. Thank you both so much for being with us. Lots on the budget, obviously. Day two now, and we're getting proper reaction from the markets now. So let's start by looking at the FT, front page there. And this is about borrowing costs tick up as investors digest Reeves' budget debt demands. So borrowing costs up, the pound down. Richard, what have you made of the market reaction and the coverage in the papers?
Me, Steve.
Steve, sorry.
Not that surprising, really. By the way, I think we should preface it with, when you read out the front pages, it is worth acknowledging that most British papers are very right-wing and we're going to try and destroy this budget. Not all of them, and not the FT. In terms of the market jitters, she is borrowing a lot of money. But the alternative would be not to borrow a lot of money. And the money is going into infrastructure projects which are desperately needed, capital spending. And everyone agreed that the election theme with two words, nothing works in Britain, and you need to find the money. Now, the economy's not growing. So how do you find the money? The answer is a combination of borrowing and tax rises. But the market is jittery, and that will make the Treasury and Rachel Reeves very nervous. My guess is, and I'll probably prove to be completely wrong, that over time, quite quickly, it'll calm down because she was being quite fiscally responsible. She was raising taxes to fill holes in public spending, not to sort of borrow recklessly. But let's see, maybe they'll go crazy. I mean, markets are unpredictable agencies.
Oh, well, I think markets are far more predictable than politicians most of the time because they're reacting to the detail. And it's what you say. We are in day 2 now. And so you do get a little bit of time to digest the Red Book. I mean, all you get from the Chancellor's statement is the things that she wants you to focus on and the things that are required for her to sort of mention at the dispatch box. I think what's interesting about this is that, look, it's not as bad as Truss's mini-budget. It's sort of getting there, but the impact is a lot lower than what happened at the mini-budget. So you would expect some market reaction. You would imagine that the Treasury has done some scenario planning for this market reaction to think about how they're starting to think about calming the markets down. The problem here, and what the markets are thinking about, or what people who are giving you loans and debt are thinking about, is she going to have to come back sooner to ask for more money? Where is she going to find tax rises if she still has a shortfall anywhere? And where is she going to find more borrowing? And how is she going to service that debt from the government balance sheet if that's what she needs to do? And that's a reaction to.
Okay, let's take a look at the front page of the Eye as well. Just a lot of the impact from this budget. This specifically, front page of the Eye, is about interest rates. Now, they're apparently or expected to fall more slowly after the budget. That's a warning from some economists, because we had been hearing, hadn't we, Steve, some pretty optimistic sounds about, them being cut potentially even twice in a row, and interest rates have been so high, causing so much pain to so many mortgage holders. Yeah, and the stories are interconnected. It's because if the markets start panicking, it becomes more expensive to borrow money, and the borrowing is going up. You're in a sort of nightmarish circle, which is very difficult to escape from. And then interest rates have to go up as a response, which happened under Liz Truss. And we're not in Liz Truss territory here, I should stress. But I ask again to those who are responding in this way, should she not have borrowed money? And should we just let the infrastructure of Britain collapse, or try and do something about it? And in doing something about it, generate the growth, this elusive phenomenon in Britain, growth. It's very interesting when the growth projections came out compared with the United States, 10% growth, and Britain's struggling at 1% and so on. So maybe this borrowing can generate growth. But it's nerve-wracking in the first few days.
Look, I think that there's an interesting way to think about this. One is, yes, she needs to borrow, but what it feels like she's borrowing for is not going to be productive growth. So I think the proof is in the pudding. What is she going to spend the money on? Or who is going to decide how that money is going to be spent? Yeah, and is it going to be productive? So that's one point. I think the other point is that the front of the Eye, we're talking about interest rates, we're talking about the individual measures that are in there, farmers and the inheritance tax on that. So really what the Eye is talking about is altogether, what does this mean for individuals? We've just talked about what it means for markets and government borrowing. What does this actually mean for the pound in your pocket? And it's not good. Now, she did have a really difficult choice to make, and none of this was going to be easy. I think one of the challenges, if you were thinking about being really radical, is could she have done something that wasn't just sort of tinkering around the edges and playing with the rules, for example? Could she have been a little bit more radical about the way that she was thinking about tax to sort of bring in private capital from elsewhere in order to pay for those big infrastructure projects that we might need? And I think we might look back on this in 20 years' time and think that that was the missed opportunity, because growth has been bad since the financial crisis. And I think we have to recognise that there is something that's wrong fundamentally in the economy, and this budget has not addressed that point.
Yeah, Let me just pull up a front page, just The Guardian, so we bring that into the discussion as well. Front page of The Guardian, Reeves told she will have to raise a further £9 billion for public services, which of course is key, as in it's not even enough the way it is.
Well, that's the twist, isn't it? People are sort of claiming to be shocked at the level of tax rises and borrowing and so on. But if you actually look at the figures as projected for most of this Parliament, the public spending settlements are tight to the point that we are kind of facing the prospect of, to use an imprecise term, austerity. And therefore, you know, it's right that she might have to raise taxes again just to keep public services going, unless we get this economic growth. To answer Salma's point, they have tried to get private sector investment. They had that huge investment summit conveniently held before the budget, not as many might have turned up after the budget, to try and leverage in private sector investment and private capital.
Look,
but it's not going to be enough.
A summit is not going to get people to come in. What's going to get people to come in is to see that there's going to be a value on their return, and the only way that they're going to see that is that any value, any uptick that they get in their investment isn't going to be taxed away. That people look at the numbers, and that's the cold hard truth.
Yeah, which raises the question. So income tax was ruled out, wrongly in my view, but it was ruled out. National insurance for employees, ruled out. VAT, ruled out. Corporation tax, ruled out. So where do you get the money from in an economy which is not growing? Now, there is an argument that by taxing, you make the economy less capable of growing. But the alternative route has been tested for quite some time. And nothing has... the growth in the British economy has been sluggish, basically since the financial crash. And we haven't had a major kind of reflection on how we respond to the shocks of the financial crash, Brexit, COVID. I mean, as the Times reports, too many people aren't working. So there are huge fundamental issues. But I come back to the point that money did need to be raised.
Steve, Salma, we're going to have to leave it there. Coming up, the salary of the government's new value for money czar comes under fire on the front of the Daily Telegraph. We'll tell you more in just a few minutes.
And now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round. This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Oh!
Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. With me now, columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Thank you both for looking at the papers with us. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph now. A story still on the front page. It's value for money czar earns 50K for 1 day a week. So the equivalent of £247,000 a year, obviously more than the Prime Minister's pay. Salma, what do you make of this?
So I would like to start by saying I don't want to cast any aspersions on David Goldstone for taking this job, but it is one of those stories. It's such a small part of the budget who is responsible for this new magical office for value for money, which in itself is a bit of a ridiculous thing. But now his whole career history and CV has been dragged up because he's going to earn the equivalent of a £247,000 salary. So immediately, you can say instinctively, well, that doesn't sound like it's value for money. And, everything that he's done previously, whether it be on the Olympics or, anything in relation to High Speed 2, which he was also part of, is that question of, does he really understand what value for money is? And look, he's very experienced. This is the kind of guy you probably want in an organisation like that that's watching the pennies. He can't be held responsible for everything that's gone wrong, but it's a classic post-budget story that makes people sort of scratch their heads and maybe be a little bit unkind about the intentions.
There's a comical side to it. The value for money body is costing a fortune. However, by the way, there are 3 anti-budget stories on the Telegraph front page, so that's where they're coming from. However, there is a serious side to this, which is, now I've spent the whole of the first half discussing with Salma my belief that we need this public spending. But I also believe that every halfpenny has to be accounted for so that voters can get a sense that the money is being well spent, or else this project will fail catastrophically. However, I don't believe this is the way to do it. I think that the agencies responsible for spending this money need to be held to account in all kinds of fresh ways. I would even, the really big projects, I would say, right, you're not elected MPs, but you're going to come and answer to the House of Commons. New forms of accountability so we don't get the HS2 waste of inefficiencies again. I'm not sure this is the way to do it, but this is an attempt to do it, to make sure every halfpenny is well spent.
Can I ask how much is a halfpenny in modern money?
Well, let's say a few pounds, so, it might be, he might be being well paid or not, I don't know. But that's the way to do it, to hold the spenders to detailed account. And that hasn't happened with HS2, with some public projects, etc. And it needs to with this new money. But I support the new money being raised.
Let's go to another story that actually has been making a lot of headlines about the budget, and this is inheritance tax and its impact on farmers. So front page of The Sun, and I'm going to read it properly now. Serves me right for not reading my scripts before I kick in the bullocks. So...
I mean, The Sun's having a great run of front pages.
And this is about basically inheritance tax for farmers, which is now, I think it's the £1 million threshold, and now it would be 50% relief effective rate at 20%. But the accusation is that this will stop a lot of farmers handing over the farm to family, and it has a huge implication for British food production.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Sun have gone for the government. They were quite pro it yesterday because it didn't put up petrol. I think it should have put up petrol, and the Sun is not really rewarding it for very long because it's gone for this today. Yeah. All I would say is the tax expert, Dan Needle, has tweeted in great detail why this is nowhere near as punitive as some of the headlines have stated. And we haven't got time to go into the detail, but it's worth reading.
Yes, Dan Needle on X has talked about actually how the number of farms that might be subject to this tax is, quite small. I think the only thing that I would say is that whilst that may be true in terms of tax, what does that actually mean in terms of production? Because if you look at the Department for Environment, there are huge things happening there around food security, around biodiversity, around what farming actually needs. And so being able to have this passed down in this way through generations, rather than it being sold and, it creating productive farming for profit, which would be catastrophic for our environment, I think those are the kinds of worries that are going to emerge around this tax. It's not the unintended consequence of just a tax by itself, but actually what happens to the environment and food security.
All right, it's definitely a story that I think we'll continue to talk about in weeks to come. Steve, Salma, for the moment, thank you both so much. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, the number of deaths in the floods in eastern Spain now rises to more than 150.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.